Hello, and welcome to the 2012 League of Women Voters Election Forum. I'm the moderator, Murray Farber, a former newspaper and TV news editor. We're pleased that the candidates have joined us today so that we can learn where they stand in the primary election to be held June 5th. The League of Women Voters does not support nor oppose any candidate or political party. Before I introduce the candidates, I will explain our format. We will give each candidate a minute to tell you about themselves in an opening statement. Then we will get to the questions for 1-minute answers with 30-second rebuttals where appropriate. The order in which they speak was determined earlier by lottery. They were not given any peeks at the questions in advance. At closing, the candidates will offer a 1-minute statement. So here we go. The candidates are Bob Whalen, Vaughn Manatua, Jim Patterson, and David DeFrank, and they are candidates in the 23rd Assembly District. There are other candidates in the race, but they're not with us today for varied reasons. So let's start with an opening statement by Bob.
Thank you, Murray. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bob Whalen, and I hope to be your next Assembly member from the 23rd District because I believe in the promise of California, and that promise can be restored. Together, we can work so that we can revive our economy in our state, that we can rebuild our infrastructure, and that we can return to preeminence our educational system in our state. I hope that today, as you get to learn a little bit more about what it is that we stand for as candidates, you will look at my record as a member of the Clovis City Council, also as a mayor for the city of Clovis, and then also I want you to know that I'm a prosecutor for Elizabeth Egan, our district attorney. We have a part-time legislature in the city of Clovis, and it works well. And I'm excited that we have an opportunity here to share with you our views, and I hope at the end of the day you'll come back to choosing me as your elected representative in the State Assembly.
Thank you. Vaughn?
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vaughn Manatua. Let me spell that for you. M-O-U-A-N-O-U-T-O-U-A. I think we need to get used to that name because that is the name that will represent you in the 23rd Assembly District. This morning I stand for families because I believe that strong families create a strong community. And with a strong community, then we will have a strong state. And I challenge you this morning to see what is it that you can do to create this legacy together with me. Thank you for the League of Women Voters, and thank all of you for taking the time to view and also to see who we are. And I hope that at the end, you will look at the inner character of who we are, you will look at what we stand for, and with that, you will make the right choice. And when you are in that voting booth, whether you have endorsed someone or not endorsed someone, you will have the courage to choose what is in your heart. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the League of Women Voters giving us an opportunity to visit with you. I'm Jim Patterson. My claim to fame is I'm the granddad of Noah and Jenna Bryn, and this is a job interview. And I hope that as the debate goes forward and as the campaign goes forward, you'll look at us and you'll make your choice. This really is not about us. It really is about you, your expectations for California. We will set out the best answers to the questions before us, and we'll try our best to explain why we'd like you to hire us to represent you. I've been mayor of Fresno for 8 years, 25 years as a broadcast executive owning and operating radio stations, and I hope that we get an opportunity in this campaign to get to know each other better, and when you go to the ballot box, I'd ask you to vote for me. I'll do the very best I can to represent you.
Thank you, David.
To thank the League of Women Voters and Murray for moderating this opportunity for us to express our views directly to the public. Myself, I've worked in a small business now for a couple years representing other small businesses. So fortunately, I've had the opportunity to see how Sacramento's rules and mandates and taxes and regulations have impacted growers and different small businesses throughout the valley in a very adverse way, which is why I want to go to Sacramento and bring some new, fresh perspective. My issues that I'm concerned about is, number one, per diem abuse. I think that legislators get paid $142 a day, and they manipulate the system. And so that's why I've announced that I'm not going to take those payments. And I can look you in the eye and say that I'm managing your public funds responsibly and ethically. I want to stop high-speed rail because I think it's a $68 billion waste of money, and we have a lot of other priorities we could use that money for. And then finally, I support a part-time legislature. So I hope that you can take the time to hear about what I have to say and see if my views line up with yours, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Question. The Valley is particularly worried about the impact of water shortages on our way of life and our giant agricultural industry. Do you have any specific proposals for dealing with the shortages? How would you prioritize such areas as new dams, water banks, gray water recycling, conservation, or controlling population growth or density? So let's talk about water, and let's start with Vong.
I have seen the issue with regards to water, and I believe, to simply state, many times there are many interests with regards to water. But we need to do all the above, Murray. We need to look at how we can store more water. Next, we need to see if the distribution of water, whether it's through a peripheral canal, whether it's through any other means, to see how we can sustain that. Because without water, the valley will not survive. We as Valley constituents or Valley representatives need to band together and work together with representatives from LA and San Francisco and even Northern California to see what is the best result for the state of California. Because without water, there is no agriculture, there is no food, not just for our region, for the whole nation. So this is something that is pressing in which we need to work together to resolve. And it means that we all must willing to put all our interests together to see what best results for the state. Thank you.
Thank you. In a word, good old-fashioned hydrology. California is living on the leadership of the past. There has not been a new dam, there's not been new water storage, there has been a decay of our existing water systems. California has water falling in the north, and we transport it from the north to the south. We also have rivers here in Central California as well. Hydrology simply is storage, it is conveyance, it is cheap energy, it is affordable electricity, it is flood control, and it's also recreation. This has been the model that has worked in times past, and I think we need to focus again on the fundamentals of good scientific hydrology. And I think if we do that, we'll see the merit of moving water around the delta, bringing it to south as well, and doing a number of other things that have been mentioned here. It is important, and I think that hydrology is the answer.
We need an all-of-the-above approach. We just have, too many demands on our water, so we need to look at, number one, increasing our storage capacity. So that's going to be looking at projects like dams at Temperance Flat, Shasta, raising Shasta. That's going to be a big part of what we do. We're also going to need to rely on our congressmen here in the Valley, like Congressman Nunes, who's been doing a fantastic job with H.R. 1837, trying to get the Endangered Species Act modified so that we have the flexibility to improve California's water situation. And then finally, we need a long-term solution for the Delta. Most likely, I think that should take the form of a water tunnel that would get water out of the Delta without having the kind of adverse environmental impacts that our current pumping system does. And that would allow us to get water down through the Delta for the West Side growers, and it would help us to realize our full economic potential here in the Valley.
Thank you. Bob?
Thank you, Murray. It is amazing how expensive this water is. As a council member for the city of Clovis, we've had to address this issue. What is it that we can do as council members in order to make sure that the water that we have within our community is being well utilized? And what we have done is that we have built a surface water treatment plant so that we're no longer digging deeper wells within the city of Clovis. Instead, we're actually taking surface water that comes from the Enterprise Canal. In addition to that, we have a wastewater treatment facility. And in that wastewater treatment facility, what we're doing now is taking what used to be just shipped over to the west side of the Jensen sewer plant. Now it's being reutilized for irrigation purposes. It's those types of things that are important for the state of California. We need to be innovative in our approach. There is a proposal that's on the ballot, but frankly, it's not going to be passed as long as we have a significant budget deficit. So my priority is to get our state's budget in order first before we start talking about building additional water infrastructure.
Before we get to the next question, I'd like to explain the primary that's coming up. The primary races for the state Senate, state assembly, and Congress are called top two primaries. A voter can vote for any one candidate regardless of party. The top two, who receive the highest and second highest number of votes in the primary on June 5th, will appear on the ballot in the general election in the fall. And yes, that's a vote regardless of party. Okay, moving on to the next question, and we're going to start with Jim. Various states are confronting such social issues as gay marriage, contraception, abortion. What do you see as your position in these areas if you were elected to serve in Sacramento?
Thank you. Well, I'm going to make this as clear as I know how. I believe that a marriage between a husband, a wife, traditional marriage, I believe is a social and religious and civic institution that has done wonders to raise children and to create good citizens and pass along virtue and values. So I'm unashamedly someone who thinks that traditional marriage is important, and we need to stand for it and be a part of articulating it in Sacramento. I'm also pro-life, and I live with the living witnesses of people choosing life. I have 3 adopted children, 2 from crisis pregnancies, where the moms have decided to give that child life and hand it to Sharon and me to raise, and our family is a pro-life family.
Thank you. David?
I'm also pro-life, and I think that the state needs to have some concrete policies that enable us to promote for women opportunities other than terminating pregnancy. Opportunities like helping families like Jim's and others who are willing to take these children into their homes and give them loving homes. When it comes to contraception, I mean, obviously that's been in the news a lot lately. It's really not an issue of contraception. It's an issue of the Obama administration trying to force, institutions that have moral objections into providing health coverage for something they disagree with. So it's not an issue of whether or not, contraception is good or bad. It's whether or not the government should be telling religious institutions that they need to cover items that they don't agree with. So I completely oppose that. I oppose Obamacare broadly and also specifically in that regard.
Alexis de Tocqueville, when he came to look at our country shortly after its founding, he said, "What makes America great is that Americans are good." And really the reason that he thought that we were good is that we were a nation that understood the difference between right and wrong, the difference between good and evil. And this Constitution was formed for no other type of country except for one that knows the difference between the two. When it comes to social issues, I think that you'll find that there's no real difference between the 4 of us here. We're all pro-life. We're all pro-traditional family marriage. When it comes to making the distinction, though, I think what we need to recognize is that there has been an assault on what used to be considered good. And that assault is coming through our culture. And I think that what we need to do is make sure that the individuals themselves can make decisions as to what is good and what is evil, so that our children, when they're in the schools, they're not being coached as to traditions that are different than what are important to the family. So as your assembly member, I would make sure that we fight for those traditional values.
With regards to the issue of the definition of marriage, I stand strongly behind the decision of the citizens of California. We voted overwhelmingly to pass a definition in which we all stand behind. And I stand behind that definition, that marriage should be defined only between a man and a woman. And so that does not mean we do not recognize that there are other family structures, but constitutionally it has to be accepted, but not only that, but upheld. And so for the courts or for legislatures to overturn the decisions or the view of citizens, I think that is not our purpose. Not only that, I'm also pro-life, and I believe that many times our freedoms to raise our children, to teach how our children, you know, what they should value, that is being infringed upon because of issues like this. Thank you.
The debate continues over high-speed rail. David already mentioned it. Is it good for California and the Valley? Is it a waste of money? Where do you stand? David, want to start us off?
Yeah, I completely oppose high-speed rail. I think it's a perfect example of how we've misprioritized issues in the California legislature and of course across the state. I think that we need to improve our water infrastructure that we've talked about. We need to improve our other transportation infrastructure, including the 99, which is in horrible condition in a lot of spots. The fact of the matter is this project has been poorly managed. The price tag has changed from $100 billion to $68 billion, and we don't have a lot of the details yet. So I think that we need to oppose this project firmly. I think that it's going to tear up a lot of farmland. We already don't know how it's going to impact growers' ability to spray, how it's going to impact their ability to get from one side of their property to the other. It's going to impose just another set of burdens on our agricultural sector that we just simply can't afford right now.
Bob?
Thank you, Murray. You know, when you are elected to a position of representation, you raise your right hand and you swear to defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of California. We are here asking to represent you, and we'll take that oath when we're elected. But I think what's important to understand is what the law is. Back in 2008, the voters of California, even though I was opposed to it because we were making tough decisions in the city of Clovis and making cutbacks, the voters agreed for the state of California to issue bonds for high-speed rail. Now, there were conditions put on that issuance of the bonds, and I'm of the opinion that those conditions have not been met. Therefore, I'm opposed to high-speed rail. But the bottom line is that the legislature is likely to decide the question on the issuance of those bonds really in the next few months. So it's not going to be a decision for us to make. What we need to do if we are elected and those bonds get issued is to make sure as it comes through our region that we accommodate the businesses that are going to be displaced as a result. So we need to actively engage in that process.
You know, throughout this process, what has been reported to us as citizens and as taxpayers have changed. It has changed every single time someone has questioned whether it's the plan, whether it's the sustainability, whether it's the ridership. All we want and all we need to do is just to have it be transparent. If the dollars make sense and if it can be sustained, then yes, show us. So stop changing the numbers. Because of that, I think the public has grown weary, and it's hard to trust an authority, a rail authority, that keeps changing its numbers. Not only that, I would hold ourselves accountable on that whatever proposal comes up in the future with regards to how we will resolve our infrastructure or the rise in population, that we also be fair in our analysis, whether it's of highways, of increasing airports, that we not stop it just because it's the politically right thing to do, but because we stand behind fiscal responsibility, because we want things that make sense for the citizens. Thank you.
Yes, the Legislative Analyst's Office of the state of California, in a legislature dominated by the Democrats, has issued a report that essentially says, stop high-speed rail. It simply does not pencil. It is a $68 billion project that when the money is borrowed and cities have to be raised for the operation, and I believe they're going to have to subsidize rates to ticket buyers as well, it's going to suck a huge amount of resources away from our highways, our roads, our streets, our airports. And then secondly, I oppose it because people who want these kinds of ideas really have to level with us and be truthful about it. And every time we see another variation of the plan, it becomes worse. And so I think it needs to be stopped, and I think we need to pay attention to the fundamental infrastructures that have served us.
Thank you. There are difficulties every year in reaching a balanced budget for California. Sacramento seems to offer more rhetoric than action. So, do you have any specific proposals for resolving this ongoing problem, whether it's this year or for the future? Bob?
Thank you, Mary. You know, families all over this district, all over the state of California, know what it takes to balance a budget. You simply stop spending more than you're bringing in. It's only math. It's not that complicated. But unfortunately, the political will does not exist within Sacramento's infrastructure there with the legislature. They continue to spend and spend and spend to accommodate special interest groups. As mayor for the city of Clovis from 2007 to 2009, we saw this great recession hitting us, and we stopped spending. In fact, we brought back our spending to the point where a lot of other communities seemed to be offering more services, and we were reducing our service levels. But we knew that was the right decision then, and we took those difficult steps. And now I'm happy to report that under the leadership of me and my colleagues on the Clovis City Council, we are well positioned to take advantage of the recovery. We've increased our reserves from a low of 4% to a high of 12%. And it's that type of effort I'll bring up to California's state legislature as well.
You know, in my work in nonprofits as administrative manager for Reading and Beyond, and also as chairman of the board for Fresno County EOC, the monies are not guaranteed, and we work within the budget that is presented before us. I think for the state of California, we need to hold the legislature or the government to the same standard. And we can do this by creating a 2-year budget, but also by prioritizing what we are willing or able to fund. And when there is a shortfall, because we are living within our means, then we go through that priority list, and that's where we need to fund first. And that's a way for us to move through this budget process, because now everything can't be equal. We have to prioritize. And once we are bold enough and strong enough to prioritize the needs and define what government should provide for its citizens, then I think the budget issue is very easy. And we always have to live within our means. Thank you.
I think, first of all, people who want to be your representative in Sacramento owe you the truth. The truth of the matter is the state of California is insolvent. When you take a look at the long-term bond indebtedness and the unfunded liabilities in the retirement systems, the state of California is in fact insolvent. So I think the first priority has to be to get our financial house in order. And as mayor of Fresno for 8 years, I produced and balanced, presented to the council billion-dollar budgets. We lived within our means, and I think we were responsible with the monies that were given to us. I've been in business for 25, 30 years. That requires you to look at the income, look at the revenue, prioritize, and then spend accordingly. But I also think we need to be persuasive and persistent. We need to reach across the aisle, and we need to try to reach moderate Democrats with the story of the financial imminent collapse of California, and see if they won't help us be rational.
Yeah, the question was about how we close our state's budget gap. I think you've heard a lot from the other candidates about the past. Let me tell you about what I want to do in the future. The fact of the matter is K through 12 education spending and health and human services accounts for a vast majority of general fund expenditures. So if you're not talking about those two categories of spending, you're not talking budget reform. We need to support health savings accounts tax benefits. Right now you get benefits on the federal level. You don't get those same benefits on the state level. We need to change that. We need to go with Governor Brown's or something similar to it, his proposals for modifying CalWORKs, the state welfare program. He wants to limit, currently you have a 4-year cap on how long you can be on that. We need to bring that down to 2 while letting children remain on that program. We also need to attack the budget, the pension problems that we have in the state. We need to move from defined benefit to defined contribution plans, and we need to make sure that we can't do retroactive increases in benefits like what we've been doing so far. So those are just a couple examples of how we fix this budget problem.
This is such a difficult issue. I'm wondering if anyone wants to rebut any other candidate. Anyone want to speak up? And is there anything that you heard that you feel you have to say, no, or here's what it really is? Anyone want to comment on anything? Yes, go ahead, Ron.
You know, David brings up that, you know, we're spending too much on education. And I just want to say, you know, the investment in our children, isn't it worth more than anything else? Because we're spending almost 10 times as much after they're incarcerated, 80,000 to almost 8,000 just for them for the education. So I say any investment we can put in our children so that way they can be productive is worth that investment. And I would not decrease anything with regards to, I would just make it more efficient. And so I would like to say that with regards to taking away from education.
You got another 30 seconds on this?
Yeah, just real briefly, and I'm sure it was inadvertent, but I don't support cutting education spending. I don't think, number one, we could constitutionally with Prop 98, but also it could be that there was a misinterpretation, but I don't support cutting education funding. I also support making that more streamlined. Right now we have a lot of categorical restrictions on our funding for education. I think we should broaden that out, have just a couple block grants for a couple categories, because frankly I trust Larry Powell to know how to spend the money better than the people up in Sacramento. So I don't support reducing education funding in the state.
Any other 30-second comments? Go ahead, Jim. Go.
A little comment. And I said it earlier. Folks, the state of California is essentially insolvent. Do you know that your state is broke? It is broke. And when you look at where this state is with respect to its long-term debt and its long-term commitments to its workforce, it just simply cannot be sustained. What we need to do is to remind people on the other side of the aisle of the train wreck that is coming, the responsibility to be fiscally sound. And I hope that that message will resonate with some in Sacramento.
Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Murray. I think the really important thing to focus on as you consider which candidate to choose is who's had the experience in actually making some of these difficult decisions. And believe me, they are difficult. As mayor, when we had to lay off some employees in the city of Clovis and you end up seeing them at the grocery store or at Starbucks or at the gas station, you look into their eyes and you feel that, you know, that it's been really difficult for them and for their families. But the bottom line is that government does not exist to create jobs within the public sector. It's there to promote business, and we can do that, and we've done it in the city of Clovis, because I've shown it.
Let me move on to another question. The valley is victimized by air pollution and asthma. If you think the Assembly can help in this issue, what specific proposals can Sacramento offer to deal with this affront to good health? And let me start with you, Vong.
You know, health and good air quality is something in which we all must stand for. Because if you can't live and enjoy your life physically, I mean, what good are the rights and the freedoms that we have? And so within the valley, though, we must be fair with regards to the assessment of the air quality that we have. We are where the pocket of air rests, and it's the pollution's coming from, you know, other areas, but we are punished for it. And when we are punished for it, then businesses that are here will not remain here. They will leave because we're getting fined for it. We're getting penalized for it. And so that assessment must be fair, must be something in which we must protect businesses and protect also the environmental and the health of our children. Over half the children are diagnosed with asthma, and that's because of the air quality. So we must do our best to promote that, so that way more children can enjoy their life. Thank you.
Sure. We have 1 minute to discuss this, so I'm going to just focus, first of all, on the fact that, as Vong has said, we're getting penalized in Central California. We are seeing to it through the Air Board and others that local stationary businesses here and firms and other businesses are funding something like $100 million a year in fees in order to mitigate the kind of air pollution that stationary emitters create. I think that is terribly unfair. And as a result, all of the mobile creators of pollution, the imported air that comes our way from the Bay Area because of the prevailing winds, the trucks that drive through Central California, they're not delivering services or goods, and they're not local trucking companies. They're just coming up the 99 or up the I-5. And so I think the mobile sources have to come under the same kind of scrutiny that our local businesses have come under. It is only fair.
Yeah, I mean, of course we need some basic regulations about air quality, but we have plenty of them. So I don't support any additional regulation. And in fact, I think we need to roll back the cap and trade program that's being rolled out right now. I think that that's a perfect example of the government trying to make it look like they're proposing free market ideas, but really they're still in the old form of government picking winners and losers in the free market. You know, right now the cap and trade system allows for the government to provide free credits, offset credits to companies in sectors that they've determined have a high probability of leakage. In other words, a high probability of moving out of the state. But really, I think that's just a cover for the government to continue to pick winners and losers. And we know what happens when the government picks winners and losers in the energy sector. You get Solyndras, you get a lot of the other failed companies. So we need to get the government out of that business, and we need to maintain, of course, those basic regulations like the Federal Clean Air Act and regulations like that, but nothing additional.
One of the great things about California, what I really love about California, is our diversity of geology and geography. In the morning when I head into work to go work at the district attorney's office, in those early morning hours, I see the sun coming up over the Sierra Nevada range, and it is inspiring. We have a unique geology here in our valley, and what works in the valley isn't necessarily going to be working in Los Angeles or in San Francisco or Northern California or in the desert regions of the state of California. What has been happening, and it happens over and over again, is that for whatever reason, Sacramento thinks they know best what's going to work in the valley. And frankly, valley citizens know what is going to work best in the valley. So what I would be proposing is the diversification of some of those regulations so that instead of a one-size-fits-all in the state of California when it comes to pollution regulation, we would give more opportunities to those local air resources boards in order to make sure that they are actually addressing the issue in that region.
You want to come back with a rebuttal to anyone? Or should we move on? Good, let's move on. Let's talk about education. Students are in an uproar over the rising tuition at state universities. Chancellors say that they're doing everything they can to hold the line. What role should the House and Senate play in this issue? Are there specific areas that you would push for in cuts in terms of academics, technology, in construction, in salaries, or do we just keep passing the costs on to students? And Bob, will you start us off?
Sure. You know, I consider education to be the great equalizer. And what I mean by that is no matter where you come from socioeconomically, you have an opportunity in the state of California to receive an education. In the city of Clovis, of course, we've been able to make sure that that education is award-winning, that the students do a great job in test scores, in athletics, really in what they call mind, body, and spirit. And that is a testament to how we can make a difference. But I think when it comes to the issue of education, we are forcing too many of our kids to go into college if they don't want to go. There is no more vocational education, or at least there's not as much as when I was going to school. And there are going to be some kids who say, you know what, college is just not for me. I'd rather become an auto mechanic. That's a great thing. I'd rather become, work on the farm. That's a great thing as well. So I think what we need to do is address those issues. And again, I would say that we address them on a local level. Let the local school boards make the distinction as to what needs to be done.
My dad brought 10 children from Laos to America, and education was the key by which we reached our dreams. All 10 college graduates, a couple master's degrees, and a couple have professional degrees. Education is something in which will allow everybody to reach their dreams. And it must start even in preschool all the way to college. We must start right at preschool. We must allow every parent who can or cannot afford the ability to send their children off to preschool. The statistics and the records have shown when we invest at that young age, the consequences later are diminished exponentially. And so we must start there. Another area in which education must concentrate on is English language learners. We must work to reclassify and educate parents so that way English language learners also can move back into mainstream education and be given the opportunities of higher education. Thank you.
Thank you. We have an education system in the state of California that is a monopoly. We have an education system that is top down. We have an education system that I think oftentimes just simply goes through the motions. I really believe in liberty and freedom and opportunity and choice. And I also believe in technology. We do not have to be spending huge amounts on brick and mortar. We can have innovative classes and innovative charter schools, vouchers to create competitive, high-quality education alternatives for people who are looking to take their education and specify it to the kinds of dreams and goals that they would like to achieve. And so if I'm your representative in Sacramento, one of the things I want to focus on is liberty and vouchers and freedom and charter schools and choice. Get competition into this system. It will drive prices down and it will bring quality up.
Yeah, I think with respect to community colleges, which I think was the focus of the question, I think that the important thing we need to remember is that there is as conservatives, we stand for equality of opportunity. One of the common divides between us and liberals is that they move more towards equality of results. But it's easy for us to just focus on why equality of results is wrong. We need to make sure that we're still committed to equality of opportunity in the state. So we need to fully fund our community colleges. I think that that's one of the areas that does require our full attention. There are a lot of other places where we need to be cutting. Fortunately, community college isn't one of them. We need to make sure that we have the possibility of upward mobility. We need to make sure that people who have the will and desire to improve their lot in life have the ability to do so and aren't being held back by excessive tuition rates or anything to that extent. When it comes to K through 12 education, like I said before, we need to remove the restrictions, the strings attached to the money we're giving school districts. In 2009, we removed a lot of those, the legislature removed a lot of those restrictions, and a lot of school districts chose to spend their money differently than the legislature had allocated it. So I think that's just a prime example of why we need to give more flexibility to our school districts.
I know this is a big topic that it's hard to get it all into 1 minute. And particularly since I started off with the question dealing with universities and tuition, and I don't know if anyone wants to take another 30 seconds to talk specifically about the colleges. Any other comments on the colleges in particular and tuition? Yes, Bob.
As a student over at Fresno State, I had the opportunity to serve as student body president of that great institution, and I had a lot of fun there, but there were challenges that came along as well. And the student body presidents within the California State University system actually voted for me to be the chair of a California State Student Association, which caused me to represent the needs of the students in the CSU system up in Sacramento and also at Long Beach. But one of the big keys for us was accessibility. We need to make sure that our fees are under control, yet at the same time, we need to make sure that they're receiving education and actually able to take the classes that they need to.
We look at the issue with the colleges with just, let's not talk about the fans, just the students themselves. We've seen that what we see are students who aren't prepared for college. And that goes back to the issue was lower in K to 12. So we need to go back because once they're in college, it's too late. Now, they're taking remedial English, we're taking remedial math just to try to get a bachelor's degree when that work should have been done earlier. So if we need to invest back in the early years and then in college, then we would have excellent students who will compete with the world.
Yeah.
Just a quick comment. Two of my children are teachers and they love it. But folks, what we're not really discussing here is that an awful lot of the difference between succeeding and failing in school has to do with the students, their families, and their commitment to education. Sometimes we can be in the legislature an encouragement to families to be serious about checking their kids' homework, making sure that they're not wasting time on frivolous TV and other pop culture kinds of distractions. A lot of this has to do with the family and a commitment to education first.
Yeah, just real briefly, I won't take up the full time, but you know, I think that there are some opportunities to cut some spending, you know, on the margins. I think, for example, there's a lot of construction going on at our state universities that are just, I mean, frankly, they kind of look like resorts. So I think that we need to make sure that money is going towards hiring professors. I mean, we're competing with, you know, if you have a PhD in a hard science, we're competing with Boeing, we're competing with a lot of private industries that want those folks and their talent. So we need to make sure that we're paying our instructors enough to get the quality, and we need to make sure that we can keep fees reasonable. Thank you.
One more question dealing with education. Going back to the Bush administration, certainly Obama administration, there's this ongoing issue of what should the role of the federal government be in education? Should we expand it, cut back? What would you like to see? And let me start with Vong.
I really would propose to diminish its role as much as possible. I mean, if we can eliminate that department and allow the states to govern its own educational system, that's where I would go. And back again, even on the state level, if local school districts should be allowed or can be allowed to use the funds in their own way, because each community is different. Fresno is different than LA, is different than Eureka, is different than San Francisco. And so for, you know, because there are so many restrictions tied to the monies, if we can release some of those restrictions and allow innovative and creative ideas on the local level, I think we will see schools improved. And California then again will be setting the standard for education, not trying just to meet a standard. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think the serious issues that I think we're facing with respect to the federal government is simply the horrible mistake to federalize education on the local level. I think No Child Left Behind was in fact a mistake. I think that it does terrible damage to local government, local school boards, parents, and teachers. The great Jeffersonian principle is that government which governs closest to the people governs best. So I want to see the federal government to get out of the business of dictating top to bottom. Number one. Number two, I think we have to recognize that what the federal government has attempted to do has really made schools almost these non-competitive factories of education. And I go back to my earlier comments. There's technology, there's competition, there's choice, there's vouchers, lots of other opportunities in the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even like the level of state involvement in our schools, so much less the federal government. Again, we need to be sure we're transferring responsibility as much as we can to the local level. We need to reduce restrictions being placed on the school districts by higher level of governments, whether that's state or whether it's federal. I do think there may be some ways we can work with the federal government to improve education. There have been some ideas put forward in our party that, for example, maybe you staple a green card to every bachelor's degree or advanced degree in math or engineering. And I think that that's something we need to look at. We need to make sure that the United States and California specifically remain competitive in the various intellectual pursuits, whether that's Silicon Valley or whether it's Southern California. We need to make sure that we remain competitive in those regards. And I think that there may be a small limited role to partner with the federal government. But as a broader principle, we need to get the federal government out of our education system as much as possible.
You know, I think that we're all certainly understanding that the importance of local control is significant. And as a council member for the city of Clovis, there have been many occasions in which somebody has come up to me, and that could be at the grocery store, and they say, you know, this is the issue that I'm having to address in the city of Clovis. And so I get on my cell phone, and I call the person who's responsible for that, and I tell them this is the problem. And you know what happens? The city of Clovis responds. And they respond because we have that close connection. Citizen to the representative at the grocery store, talking to the city staff to make sure that that problem is resolved. We need more local control in our schools. If Clovis is doing such a great job, Clovis Unified School District is doing such a great job with education, we need to understand why that is the case. And maybe it would work in the Fresno Unified School District. Maybe it would work in other districts, but let the locals make that decision. Don't let the federal government come in and tell us how to do it.
We may be running low on time, but I'd hate to leave this topic today, our discussion, without touching on something that's bothering a lot of people, unemployment. What role would the Assembly play, should it play? I know we expect the Assembly, the Senate to do everything for everyone, but let's touch on this issue of jobs. Can I start with you, Jim?
Sure. I actually think this is probably one of the most significant and important issues that we're going to face going to Sacramento. The problem is that California is shedding jobs by the thousands. Almost every week we see reports of companies that are fleeing California. If you take a look at California's tax structure, its regulation structure, and its unfriendliness to business, there's stories that are just legion. And then you take a look at states like Texas, take a look at places like Ohio, who over a period of time have swung the regulatory pendulum back to sanity, that have started to reduce taxation and to be business friendly. As a result, the economy in Texas is far ahead of the state of California, and Ohio is actually turning around significantly. So I think we can learn from states like Texas and Ohio and others who do job creation well, who have reasonable taxation and regulatory structures, and move the pendulum away from being a state that sheds jobs to a state that competes for jobs and actually earns new and better employment.
Yeah, the government doesn't create wealth, and that's something that I think a lot of the politicians up in Sacramento don't understand. Every time they want to give a dollar to the person on the left, they need to take it from the private sector, and so that's just an extreme problem that we have in this state. So, and that's what's resulted in 2011, businesses were leaving this state at an average rate of about 5 per week. Back in 2008, which is the latest data I've seen, 23% of the tax burden was being placed on sole proprietorships. That's just an unsustainable way to run a state. So we need to change. We need to first fight any kind of tax increase efforts by whether it's Governor Brown or whether it's Molly Munger. We need to oppose both of those as strong as we can. It's also one of the few areas that we as Republicans will have some, a significant voice in up in Sacramento during budget debates and throughout the legislative session. So we need to make sure that we're going into the broader cuts in spending to make sure that the government's not sucking money out of the private sector that could be used to create jobs here in the state.
You know, one of the great things about campaigning is that you have the opportunity to have great conversations with those who have really been building up this valley. And as I've been on the campaign trail, I've spoken to some small business owners within our valley. And what they've told me is that, just leave them alone. Let us do our own business. Let us take care of our own business. Please, Sacramento, quit telling us how to run it. Yet for whatever reason, there are people up in the state legislature who think they know best how to run a business. And that's not true. It's the business owner who knows how to create jobs. It's the business owner who knows how to create revenue. And one thing that I think needs to be followed up on is that there was a study that indicated that in order to comply with all of the state regulations in California, it actually costs the small business owners $500 billion per year. $500 billion per year. Now, granted, some of those regulations might be important, but many of them, as I've been talking to these small business owners, say that they're duplicative or unnecessary, and there is no question about it. There are those who are in the bureaucracy who agree that they are duplicative and unnecessary. But the legislators, they want to get a bill passed so that they can put some notch in their belt. Well, that's not the way that I'm going to be doing things in Sacramento. It's my intention to eliminate so many of those regulations so that we can free these small businesses to create jobs, to create revenue for both local and state government as a result of taxation. If people want to increase revenues for the state of California, don't increase taxes, improve our business climate, and that's what will increase our revenue. So that's what I'd be doing in order to deal with our unemployment situation in the valley. Free these businesses to hire more people.
Yes. Jobs. Jobs come from businesses, and it should come from businesses instead of the government itself. Many businesses are leaving because of all the regulations and the taxation that has been placed upon them. Those that aren't leaving are your small businesses. Small businesses from immigrant communities, from your mom and pops, because they're invested in the community. But one day they will leave because that family structure will break down because it'll be unsustainable So we as representatives must go up and eliminate any law that goes against just creating fairness and a free marketplace. Those are the only laws that need to be in place. Anything else, I think, is excessive. Not only that, the free market many times can regulate itself. And so that way the quality of the services, the quality of the product itself will be one in which we as consumers will benefit from. But if we want to talk about jobs, then we also need to talk about businesses and how we can keep businesses here in California and how we can help the small businesses to stay here and to sustain and to support their families. And so with that, I say if we can eliminate, any one of us can eliminate some of these unreasonable regulations, then I think businesses and jobs will increase, I think, automatically or immediately. Thank you.
Lots of ideas, and let me give you all a chance to summarize, wrap up, and take another minute. David, let me start with you.
Well, again, I appreciate the opportunity that we've had here today to express our views on the various issues. Look, you've never seen my name on a ballot before, and that's something I'm extremely proud of. I think that the Valley needs some new voices representing it, and I look forward to doing that as your assemblyman. Like I said today, I have a couple priorities. Number one, I think we need to shine a light on the per diem abuse that's going on up in Sacramento, which is why I've declined any of those payments once I'm your legislator. I think we need to stop high-speed rail. I don't think we need more reports and consultant examining the issue. We've already spent hundreds of millions of dollars on that, and it doesn't take that much time to realize that this is an example of skewed priorities and something we need to stop right now. Finally, I think we need to have a part-time legislature. I think that would allow legislators to spend some more time in their districts, to realize what it's like to have to try and earn money under the regulations they pass every single day. So I can't promise you that I'm going to fix every problem up in Sacramento. I can promise you I'll never vote for a tax increase, and I'll never betray the conservative principles that I hold, and I'll never betray your support that you show me with your vote. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Murray, and thank you for the League of Women Voters. This has been a wonderful time for us to tell you a little bit about why we want to represent you up there in Sacramento. And I hope that you would agree with me that as you look at all four of us, that we're all good candidates. And I believe that the decision is going to be difficult for you as you try to figure out who it is you're going to vote for. But I guess if I was to set myself apart, what it would be is that you know that as a council member for the city of Clovis and also as a mayor for the city of Clovis, that I've had to make those difficult decisions. And I've had success in making those difficult decisions that need to be made up there in Sacramento. I believe in our state. I think we can bring it back. I've had the experience of being able to make those types of decisions that brings a community back when it's on the threshold of having to look at some deficits. But just don't take my word for it. We've all had an opportunity to visit in front of the two chambers of commerce, both in Clovis and Fresno. And both the Fresno and Clovis Chamber of Commerce have endorsed me. Ashley Swearingen has endorsed me. Mike DeManuel Jr. has endorsed me. Larry Powell has endorsed me. I got the associations for Fresno Police and Fresno Fire, Clovis Police. If you don't take my word for it, look at this broad scope of people who have endorsed me, and please endorse me with your vote. Thank you.
You know, as we talked about the issues today, many times these issues don't discriminate based upon our party affiliation, based upon our economic situation. They just hit us. And as your representative, I will listen to each and every one of you. And I will listen to the Democrats, I will listen to the poor, I will listen to the pockets of the community that have not been heard in this district. And we must work together. We must always work together. I don't come with a party platform. I don't come with a backing of anyone. I come to resolve issues. And if you look at my background, that's all it's been. And every time I've resolved an issue, it's been with Democrats, independents, the Green Party. No, it's been with people. And that's what we can't forget. Just because it's heavily favored one party over the other, we need to stop that. Today is when we change government. Today is when the government now works back and again for the people. Today is when the people have the power. And if you elect me, Vong Manatua, M-O-U-A, N-O-U-T-O-U-A, the power will be restored back to you again. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity and for the League of Women Voters. As I said earlier, this is a job interview. This really is not about the endorsements of interest that we get one way or the other. This is not really about deep resumes or the experience that we may or may not have. At the end of all of this is a question that you will make a judgment determination on in the privacy of the ballot box or at home when you mark your ballot. I'm just asking for your support. I'm asking you to look at the record both in public life and private life. But I also need to suggest that it's not so much about what we want to achieve, it's what we can achieve in Sacramento. And frankly, it's going to take us reaching across the aisle, two Democrats, moderate and conservative Democrats, being persuasive and persistent with respect to our traditional and conservative values. Demonstrate that they work other places and that they can work in California to move us all forward. That's what I pledge to you I'll do. Thank you.
Well, our time is up. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, and incidentally, I am a member of the League, I want to thank the candidates for sharing their views and thank Community Media Access Collaborative for providing its facilities. Now, it will be your turn to be a good citizen and vote in the primary on Tuesday, June 5th. If you have any questions about voting procedures, the county clerk's office will be glad to assist. You can phone 559-600-8683 or email clerk-elections@co.fresno.ca.us. Thank you and goodbye.